Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Fishers of Men. Today, I'm very happy to have my dad here with me. He's been a hero of mine for as long as I can remember, and today we want to talk a little bit about his story and how God has worked in his life. Dad, we're going to get started here, and I would love for you to tell your story, especially what it was like growing up as an old colony Mennonite in Mexico. So, what are some of your earliest memories of living in Mexico as an old colony Mennonite?
Early years, I remember going to school and we had to walk a long way. And one of the things at school, we had girls on one side and the boys on the other side of the room. And so the boys were playing on one side of the school and the girls were on the other side of the school. So we were never playing together, but I remember going to school the first day and I had actually accidentally walked into the wrong door, and that made a lot of fun for the rest of the children. They found it funny, and so, but I survived that one and then and got on.
So, our old colony schools is very different than our typical Anabaptist schools today.
The schools back in Mexico were very, very different. And I don't know what they exactly are today, but back in the day when I went to school, they were very different. Yeah, there was a lot of discipline as far as behaving. We had to sit still. We had to look to the front. And it seemed to be that was a highlight of the school to behave.
Mm-hmm. And I remember you telling me stories of some of your teachers, and teaching in that culture was not a very well respected job. Tell me a little bit about teachers in that setting.
It was very interesting to see that people that didn't have any other job and needed a house to live in, they were often the ones that ended up being a teacher because they had no other option. And so yeah, it was unfortunately a very low grade job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was teachers that I remember in one instance that this one teacher, he before he became a teacher, he went bankrupt. I think he had a woodworking business that he started, and went bankrupt, and he lost his house, and there was no other option for him than to be a teacher. So what he did is, unfortunately, he couldn't read, but his wife was able to read. So then he got his wife to help him along, and he ended up being a teacher for 30 some years. And then by the end of his career, he was one of the best teachers.
Wow, very different than what is common today. It's almost hard to believe that you'd have a teacher who wouldn't know how to read or write themselves.
We had there was a lot of very straight rules, and sometimes it got a little bit overboard. The teacher would want to find out if we were really behaving or if we were just when he was in the class. So then sometimes what he did, he would go to the back, and we weren't allowed to look back. We had to sit in school and look to the front. And he would pretend that he would go out the back door. He would slam the door, and we thought he would go back. And here he would actually stand in the back and watch what we were doing. And those that would get caught, they would get a punishment. And the other thing was that when we were looking to the girls' side, because the boys were on one side and girls on the other side, we would look to the girls' side, and anyway, then he would make us go and sit with them as a punishment. And I don't know if he figured out who we were looking at, or if he thought that he would make us sit with a certain girl, then that would be a punishment for us to not want to do that anymore. Or if we would look out the window, then he would. They had the schools were built with adobe bricks, and so they had deep windowsills, and they were usually higher windows. So if we would look out the window, then and he would see that, then we would have to go and stand in the windowsill and look out for a while as a punishment. And there was different occasions, and we weren't angels. We weren't perfect. And but I remember one occasion where my brother he had a problem that he couldn't talk very well, and was stuttering. And so then he was very nervous, and I don't remember exactly what it was that brought it to this point, but anyway, he was supposed to have punishment. So the teacher took him and tied him to a wooden bench, and then he had a V belt, old V belt, and he was pretending that he was gonna spank him with that as he was tied down on this bench, and he didn't hit him then, but then he just really scared him, and that definitely didn't help to improve the situation with his nervousness.
Sounds like a lot of it was just fear tactics, and obviously too there was a lot of physical abuse that happened to children.
Yeah.
It wasn't like school today where some children look forward to school day.
No, we were all looking forward to being done with school. That was not a fun time of. I happened to be the teacher's what do you call it?
Teacher's pet.
Teacher's pet. Yeah, probably the best way to describe it. But anyway, I was always on pretty good stand with him, and I'm not sure what it was. Not that I was that perfect, but we, for some reason, I got along with him better than some did. And here, this one time, we had several of us had been looking to the girls' side, and somebody had seen it, or I don't remember if the teacher seen it, but then we were claiming that there were several of us that we were trying to get. Anyway, then the one boy, he would deny it. He said he didn't. And several of us said that yes, he did. And anyway, then the teacher was trying to find out who was lying. So he went and figured out a system to test us how we did, see if we lied or not. So he found an old broom, one of the straw brooms, not sure what they're called, but anyway, he found one of those, and then he broke off one of the straw pieces, and then given us each one of them, and we had to put it in our mouth and hold it there for a while. And then he came around, and the ones that he claimed, the ones that were turning green or were greener than what they were when we first put them in the mouth, those were the ones that were lying. And so then, sure enough, he concluded that the one guy that said he didn't look there, his turned greener, and so he, in his mind, he was sure that that was the truth. And anyway, he ended up getting a more severe punishment. I think we all got spanked, but I don't remember that part anymore, exactly how that was. But yeah, he did his part to try to figure out what it was. One of the things about school, this goes back to my dad's childhood. When he was at school, the teacher would also try to get out and see how the children would behave, because it seemed to be the focus of the whole thing, that it was how the children would behave when they weren't there. And so Dad's teacher decided that he would climb up to the ceiling, and for some reason they had a ceiling with cloth. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Like used to be back in the day, they would have had some kind of feed bags with cloth or something like that. And anyway, they would have used that to sew a big piece of cloth and staple it to the ceiling or something. Anyway, but he would get up on the rafters and crawl up and listen from above, see what the children would do and what they would, if they would behave. Obviously, he couldn't see them, but for some reason he misstepped and he actually fell through the ceiling and came tumbling down in front of the children. Anyway, that was a little bit of a humorous side on that part, but it seemed to be all about trying to figure out how the children would do. And my teacher, when the one particular teacher anyway, he would get drunk. We wouldn't necessarily have known back then, but I remember that my brother would have come home and he would have told mom that the teacher must have had a bad headache today because he had rubbed himself with alcohol. He was smelling like alcohol, and he would have rubbed his head with alcohol. Anyway, but yeah, now thinking back, knowing that he was actually drunk quite a bit, and he would have went out, and then I remember the one particular day that he wouldn't show up at school at all. He would come to the window and made some signs to the bigger children, and they would have done some things.
We talked a little bit about schools. What was it like to grow up within the Old Colony Church?
I remember being in church a couple times. I don't know exactly how many times, but it was not common for children to go to church. And so mom or dad would stay home with the children, and they would take their turns to go to church. I remember one instance that one of my parents had been at church, and there was a couple that took one of their little children along, and she was playing around a little bit, sliding back and forth on one of the benches. And the minister had actually commented on them and saying that the parents should take care of her child. And so situations like that made it that that parents just didn't take their children to church, and so therefore we didn't go to church.
You said there was a few times that you did go to church as a child. Do you remember anything about those times, or were those special occasions?
I don't know what the occasions would have been, but I would have been a little bit bigger already. I'm not exactly sure what age I would have been, but I remember sitting behind somebody, and I don't know for what reason, I would have bent over my head and touched the man in front of me, and it must have annoyed him or something, and he actually grabbed back and held my hair, and I couldn't lift up my head, so I had to sit there for a while.
So maybe a little bit of that yanking was what caused baldness. No.
Yeah, probably. Well, one of the things I remember being at the Old Colony Church, that one of the things was that communion service was a closed service. We didn't know what happened there, what it was all about, because which nobody did talk about it. But by the time we started figuring it out and trying to have questions about it, I was a little bit older already, and we did know that it was a secret thing that was happening there, but we didn't know what it was. And so we came up with some ideas what it might be, because we knew that there was after baptisms there was usually a lot of weddings happening, but there had to be a communion service before the wedding could start. So our conclusion was that we figured that it was marriage counseling, because why would they have to be at a communion service before they got married? So we didn't know any better, so then we decided that must be that. So anyway, afterwards we found out and found out it was actually different. It wasn't what we thought it was. Well, yeah, we were not allowed to have vehicles. We had horse and buggies, and all our way of transportation was with horses, and the tractors on the fields had to be on steel wheels, so it was hard to get around with them, so we wouldn't use them for that. And there was the whole intention that it was supposed to be slow, and there was a bus that was going to the city daily, and when we wanted to go to the city, and we had to travel by bus.
So we've been talking a lot about the Old Colony culture, and it was very legalistic, you could say. There's a story I remember you telling me about a tricycle growing up. You mind telling that story for us?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Dad was probably had a little bit of what I have too, that I like to build stuff myself. And the other thing was that we were not allowed to have tricycles or bicycles. And so Dad would have figured that if he would build one himself and maybe build it a little bit different than the ones that he could buy, then maybe that would be acceptable. Anyway, he ended up building a tricycle, and I got it. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I must have been about 3 years old, maybe. Yeah, around 3 years old. Anyway, we were living across the street from one of the deacons, and for some reason he had seen that I had been playing outside with this tricycle, and they found out about it, and they made sure that we had to get rid of that tricycle and not play with that anymore.
How then did you join the Kleine Gemeinde Church? And tell me a little bit about how they came into your community and some of the change maybe that they brought.
Well, maybe to explain that a little bit, I should talk a little bit about our youth before. My parents, even though they didn't go to church, but they were very concerned about us as a family. They wanted the best for us, even though they didn't know how to do it. But the youth was very, very immodest. Very there was a lot of drinking happening, and a lot of they didn't know any better. They did what they were taught, and so there was smoking, drinking, and very, very low
Immoral lives.
Yeah. Anyway, then there was different problems in the church where why they certain people were couldn't get along with the church, got excommunicated, and through that more and more people were excommunicated, and eventually there was some people that almost out of revenge. Up till then, this was a very strict Old Colony where nobody else but Old Colony people were living. And so there was one bishop for the whole colony, and I think it was 4 or 5 churches, and everything was under a very strict and controlled atmosphere. And then there was several men that were actually excommunicated, and they went and invited the Kleine-minded church to come and start with a school to begin with, the better school. And it was some of them would have mentioned it later that it was almost as a revenge to the ministry, to not out of a right mind but it ended up being that God used it for good, because it brought a lot of good, because the Kleine-minded school came in, and people for once could see how children actually could start to enjoy school, and how they could start to learn, and how to read and write, and it was just a complete game changer, because there was just a new life came in. And through that, then there was also soon after that, or maybe that was from the beginning on, that was the idea, but soon after that there was evening service or Wednesday night services that started. And I remember one time, I think it was on a Sunday night, I don't remember, was it Sunday or Wednesday? But anyway, during an evening that we were still at the Old Colony church, but there was a service that we went to, and we waited till after dark. We went there with a buggy, and our whole family went there. And my parents were very fearful that people would see them, so they waited till after dark, and then we went to see to the service. And little did I know then, but the preacher that had the message that was happened to be Laura's uncle, and which at that time I didn't know it yet, but then here and I still remember what he was talking about, and he had the story of Nicodemus, how he chose to go to see Jesus after dark. And we don't know exactly what Nicodemus' idea was, but we knew exactly what our idea was, why we went after dark. And so it's always been a bit of a fascinating story to me, because that's exactly what we did, whether that was his idea or not. But yeah. And through that there was the school, especially teachers came from northern Mexico, and they came and taught school there, and
one of them really got a hold of your attention.
Yes, that was the thing. That was Laura came there, and she was actually the second one. There was two girls that came, and married couple, and they stayed for a year or two, and then I believe it was the third year when Laura came. Anyway, then she came, and I remember that we heard that there was a new girl coming, and I was working in a grocery store, and I still remember that the day of after she arrived, I was very curious. I knew her brother, and so I was just very curious to meet her, and I remember being at the grocery store, and at that time there was not a self-service store. We had a counter, and people came and asked for things, and then we had to go and get what they were asking for, and then we were serving across the counter. And here I was just snacking on something. I remember having a sandwich, and here the old teacher from the last year and the new teacher came walking into the store, and so I quickly went and hid my sandwich underneath the counter. And for some reason, the little bit of connection that I had with knowing her brother, then it was very special to see her, and for some reason it was just a quick connection with her.
It's fun to hear a little bit from your past in that way. A question I had is, what age were you then when you joined the Clandestine Church and you left the Old Colony behind? Did you do that as a family? Was that your personal decision? You came out of a life of partying and drinking and all kinds of things, but when was it that you actually joined into the Clandestine Church?
Well, like I had mentioned, the first service that we went to was the evening service, but then soon after that, my parents were actually, they were found out that they went there. And during that time, right over that time, my grandpa on my dad's side passed away. And at that auction sale, after he had passed away, my sister had a new dress, and there was some kind of I'm not sure, a piece of lace or something was sewn onto her front of her dress. And one of the ministry had noticed that and reported to the bishop. And then my dad was invited to the Thursday meeting, which they always had. And Dad had no idea what he was. Actually, my parents were both invited there. And that meant that they were in trouble. They had to come and they had to confess something. But when they got the invitation to go there was no information about what, and so they just that was maybe the right word would be kind of upset because he didn't know what it was, and because there was so much problem going on already, he decided that he is not gonna let mom come along, so he went by himself. And then when he came there, then they asked him, "What are you bringing today?" And he said, "I don't know. I am just here because I was invited." And so then finally they told him that my sister had been seen at the auction sale with a necklace. And Dad said, "No, it can't be. It would if she would have had that, that would have been completely out of his control. That would have and that it is just not true." But anyway, he said that he would if that was what's seen, then he would be sorry about it. He wouldn't. That's not.
Yeah.
Anyway, then he was actually pardoned of it. But then since he was he didn't bring his wife, mom didn't come along, then he was re-invited for the next week, Thursday, and he was supposed to bring her. And Dad said, "No, I'm the man of the house, and I will make sure that this is not happening again." But anyway, then he said, I mean, he decided not to. I'm not sure if he told him, but he decided not to bring mom there. And then they were both excommunicated because they decided not to go there. And so then that's when mom and dad were sold, said, "You know what, we are going to switch over to, we're going to start." And I think I would have wanted before already, but I think mom and dad would have been a little bit scared. And because of what was all happening, we were a little bit reserved on how to. But then after that, we started going there. In my youth at the old colony, there was a lot of time spent on the street, and a lot of times we were either getting into drinking or into different things, to sometimes into troublemaking, sometimes into different and also try to have fun. In our mind, we figured that we were going to have fun that one Sunday afternoon because we had seen one of the ministers, and he was known to run after youth when they had. We were often carry our tape recorders or radios on the street, and we were not allowed. That was not the thing that we should have done, but we did. And this one minister was known to literally run after and chase young people. And so we had seen him going to town, and we knew that he was going to come back. And one of the youth in my group had this old radio at home that was just a shell, and we had this smart idea that would be fun to have a bit of fun with this minister. So we would go and get this radio, this shell of whatever it was, and we would put some weight in it. We would put some stones in it and pack it up that it would look half decent real. And then we were waiting there and waiting, and he wouldn't come back. And so finally it was time for me to go home and do chores. But then soon after I had left, one of them was still sitting there and waiting, and sure enough, this minister came back, and he pretended that he was carrying this radio, and this minister was coming closer and catching up with him. And as he was getting closer, then he noticed that this guy was carrying a radio, and so he was going faster and trying to catch up with him. And eventually this guy started running, and then this minister jumped off his buggy and ran after him and caught up with him, and took this radio out of his hands and just furiously took this radio and threw it to the ground, and then the stones were flying. And so he was tricked into this here, and he was so disappointed. He was I don't remember exactly what comments he was making, but he was.
Oh wow.
Anyway, that was a type of fun that we thought was fun. Saying that is that I don't. Not saying this here to run them down, because they didn't know they were trying. The same minister at one time, I remember that we were also on the street somewhere and also having some music, and he would have come close, and then he was kind of yelling after us and saying that we should not. I don't remember exactly, but something about we shouldn't mock, and I think it was Jesus. That I don't remember exactly how he said it. Obviously, we didn't have a relationship with the ministry at all, and that's what one of the biggest things that we found when we had the Kleine Minded Church came, and we had a relationship with the ministry, and we could become best friends with them, and that was just unheard and unknown before. There was not that we didn't have problems, but there was a relationship that we actually wanted to, and we wanted to change, and we wanted to improve. And before, that was just not a relationship that we had. A little bit more about my youth. We would there was a lot of drinking happening, and I didn't particularly want to do that, have that kind of a life. But I had my friends, and they were into it, and I got into it, and we would smoke. My parents had a small little store where we were selling cigarettes and whatnot all. But anyway, and I would sneak cigarettes along, and I would hide them in my boots. I would have cowboy boots, and then I put them in my boots to hide them, because mom and dad wouldn't have wanted me to do that. And I did it hidden from them, and dad did it from me. He did. I found out a couple of times that dad was doing the same thing, and so we were doing it, not knowing. But one time I remember very clearly, and I think mom and dad were suspicious that something was going on, and they had asked me to feed the horses before I went out on Sunday, right after lunch, and I didn't feed him, and I didn't even pretend that I did, but I just said I had forgotten, and I didn't. And then I don't know why. I think they were suspicious that I had something, but anyway, then I was dressed up already with my boots and everything packed away, and so they said I should go and feed the horses before I go out, and then I was gonna go and change my boots to other shoes, and dad said, no, you can change right here. You can take the. Anyway, when I took my boots off, then the cigarettes came falling out, and nothing was ever mentioned about it. I just put them on the table there, and I left them there till next day, and I took them back to the store. But yeah, it was not that I was a smoker during the week. I would hardly ever smoke, but unless I would meet my friends, and out of peer pressure, I did. Anyway, but I was very sick and tired of it, because back then already I had problems with headaches, but I knew that if I smoked a lot, that it would be only worse, and I would refuse to take a headache pill on a Sunday night, because I knew it was because I was smoking. And so yeah, it was not a fine time of my life. And then the one time I got really drunk. It's not that I often did, but I one time remember that I was completely drunk, that I was out of my control. I don't remember a lot of things that happened that night, but I do remember that we came to a certain place. I don't know if I walked by myself into a adobe house, or somebody pushed me against it. That I remember, but I had scraped my whole face along the side, and so obviously that was really, really embarrassing, because I had to go to work next day, and I was working in a grocery store, and everybody wanted to know what happened, and there was only one thing to do, and that's to say that I got drunk. And anyway, yeah, that's those are a few stories of my youth life.
Maybe switching gears here a little bit, fast forwarding a couple of years, you talked about how you met my mom and you started your family there in the colony in Mexico. But then in the year 2000, you moved to Canada. And of course, that's where I was born. So I'm the only non-Mexican of the family in that way. But what happened, or why the move to Canada, a place where you didn't know anyone, or you didn't even know the language at that time? You didn't know English. Why move your entire family across the world?
I don't understand it all either, but obviously God led us here. We feel it very clearly. There was a number of things back in the day. Like, we were married for about 8 years, roughly, and 3 of our children were born already, and it was a time when it was pretty tough to make a living in our colony. And also there was some disagreements that we had with the church. We knew that there was some problems, and one of the things was that we were open for more reaching out to Spanish people. And for some reason, we there was a Spanish boy that came to church at a time, and we were trying to help him out, and he wasn't accepted the way we thought that he should have, and so there was disagreements on that part. On other parts, that the church was going through a very, very rough and tough time. And during the time, there was a man from Alberta, Canada, that came to have revival meetings in our church, and for some reason we were impressed with him, and didn't know very little about his church, but somehow we were impressed with that, and I think if we talked to him about it, and he would have invited us to come to Canada. And then eventually we were starting to think about moving to Alberta. We always said that we would never move to Ontario, because that's where all the rest of the whole colony moved, and we did not want to go there. And so we decided that was not the place to go. But before we were ready to move to Alberta, there was problems in the church there as well. And the people that we knew there, and also the minister that we got to know, they were moving away, and they were not going to stay there. So that was not the place to go for us. The bishop of that church that was in charge there was also in Ontario, and he had said why we would not join or come to a place where there was a more established church. And so that is why we ended up then, after all, coming to Ontario. Laura's mom at the same time wanted to move to Canada, because she got married to a man from Ontario. And so then we decided to come here after all.
Wow. Yeah, that was a whole process in and of itself, to move a growing family to a new country and to learn a new language. Do you want to speak a little bit about how that adjustment was, especially going into a church, learning English, of course? In Mexico, the Russian Mennonites there speak Low German, Plattdeutsch, and High German in churches as well. So you didn't know English, you used 3 other languages. But what was it like to try to learn English at, how old were you when that move happened?
I was 30 years old. Actually, not quite, but almost 30 years old. And it was tough. But the good thing is that Laura knew English, and I could come home and I asked her, what do I say when somebody says this, or what do I do? And so that was very helpful in that respect. And I think you learn best once you just are determined that this is the right thing to do, and you just commit yourself, and you just want to know, and you just don't give up. And so yeah, there was a tough time, and the other thing was that there was no, at my work that I started, there was nobody else that spoke my language. So either you learn or you go home. One of the hardest things at church was Sunday school. Serge was a little baby, and he was very fussy, and I took advantage of that because he was fussy and he didn't want to sit in church, and so I took him out in the foyer. But it was more for me to hide behind him than for anything else. But then Sunday school was a tough one for me, because I would have always thought I was quite involved back in Mexico in our church, and I would have thought I had comments on things, and I would have loved to comment on things. And here we came to a country where I didn't know the language, and it was very hard. And so eventually I learned a little bit more, and it came slowly. And but the hardest thing was that I had to translate everything in my mind before I could. And by the time I had figured out what I was going to say and how I would say it, then they were long gone and onto a different topic, and people didn't catch on what I was trying to say. And so it was pretty tough. The other thing was that I struggled with a lot was prayer meetings. And I remember very clearly one night we were in one of the Sunday school rooms. I think it was before revival meeting, and so we were several of us there, and I struggled again very much, because I wanted to pray, I wanted to, but then all of a sudden came to me, you know what? I'm not praying to these people around me here. I'm praying to God, and I decided to pray in German, and I believe that God heard me, but also that I got peace over that, and that didn't let that bother me anymore. But I'm glad that I'm over that now. I don't have to. So I can now pray with those that pray in English as well.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm inspired too by how you just let God use you, and you take His direction. We won't go into the story of how our family went to Nicaragua in 2014, but that was another move to a brand new country, and then the rest of us children could learn a little bit of what you went through to learn a new language, but ultimately now you're back in Canada and being used of God there.
No, I would just like to encourage each one of us to not give up just because it's hard. It's not a time to give up. Just keep on, and I'm talking to myself that just because something is hard doesn't mean that that's a reason to give up.
Like my mom often has told me, if God has called you to it, He will bring you through it. And I pray that listening to my dad's testimony today, you've been inspired, not because of his goodness, but because of the goodness of our Heavenly Father. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I pray that God will bless you richly.